When I opened my eyes after 3 long years in a coma, the first thing I saw was Joan slipping a ring onto Robert's finger. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but my heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of 1,000 stones. The woman I had loved with everything I had, the woman I had fought death itself to return to, was standing hand in hand with my best friend, her face radiant with a happiness she had never shown me. From the shadows of the hospital doorway, I watched them exchange whispered vows. Joan clutched Robert's hand tightly, as if afraid he might disappear, while my body, still weak and trembling, lay unnoticed in the sterile bed across the room. In the moment I needed her most, she was making promises to someone else. Memories of the past flooded back, each more painful than the last. I remembered the nights she would sit by my bedside, reading me stories about the future we would build together. I remembered her tears falling onto my hands, her voice trembling as she begged me to wake up. I remembered believing her. Now, I realized those tears were never for me. A nurse passing by gasped when she saw me awake, rushing to call the doctors. Joan turned at the noise, her face paling as our eyes met. There was a flicker of guilt, a tremor of fear, but she quickly masked it with a smile too forced to be real. Robert didn't even flinch. He merely slid his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. I closed my eyes, feeling the betrayal settle into my bones like ice. I had fought through darkness and pain for 3 years, believing that if I could just come back, everything would be the same. But the world I returned to was colder than the one I had left behind. I was Lucio Valentine, the man who had once believed that love could overcome anything. The man who had thought loyalty, history, and memories meant something real, something indestructible. I had grown up with Joan. She was the neighbor's girl with tangled hair and a sharp tongue, the one who always pulled me into her reckless adventures. We fell in love young, stupid, and fearless. I gave her everything I had, every dream, every hope, every broken piece of myself. She said she wanted a forever with me, and I believed her because I didn't know yet that forever could have an expiration date. Robert was supposed to be my brother, not by blood but by every bond that counted. We had survived high school fistfights and college heartbreaks together. He stood beside me when I proposed to Joan, grinning like he was the happiest man in the world for me. And now he was the one slipping rings onto her finger while I lay half dead, in a hospital bed, forgotten like a worn-out relic. When the doctors flooded in after the nurses' alarmed cries, Joan rushed forward too, playing the concerned fiancé role she had abandoned long ago. Her fingers trembled as they brushed my hair back from my forehead, her touch light, hesitant, full of guilt she couldn't hide. "Lucio," she breathed, tears sparkling in her eyes. "You're awake." The words barely touched me. They floated past like the hollow echoes of an old song I no longer recognized. I looked at her face, the same face I had memorized under countless sunsets, but all I could feel now was an unbearable emptiness. Robert stayed behind her, his jaw tight, his arms crossed over his chest. No apology, no shame. Only the cold confidence of a man who had already claimed what wasn't his. They said it was a miracle that I had woken up. They said I should be grateful. But gratitude was a foreign language to me now, lost among the ruins, of promises broken and vows forgotten. As the days passed, Joan rarely left my side. She played the part of the devoted lover well, holding my hand when nurses passed by, feeding me soup with a trembling spoon, whispering soft words as if we were still the same Lucio and Joan from before. But late at night, when she thought I was sleeping, her phone would light up with messages she didn't dare open in front of me. Her gaze would drift to the door, to the world outside my room where Robert waited, hidden just beyond my reach. I wasn't blind. I wasn't stupid. I knew what love looked like. I knew what betrayal tasted like. The doctors said my body needed months of rehabilitation to walk again, to live a normal life. They didn't understand that it wasn't my muscles that were broken. It was everything else. One afternoon, as Joan helped me into the wheelchair, her laughter too brittle to be real, Tracy appeared at the doorway. Tracy had been Joan's best friend once, before secrets had a way of souring every friendship they touched. Tracy's eyes were full of pity when she looked at me. Not the condescending kind, the kind that saw the truth. "Lucio," she said, carefully as if stepping onto thin ice, "it's good to see you awake." Joan stiffened beside me, her grip tightening on the wheelchair handles. Tracy noticed but said nothing more. For a long moment, the air between us was heavy, loaded with words that none of us dared speak. Finally, Tracy lowered her eyes and gave me a weak smile before walking away, leaving behind the scent of unearthed truths. In that brief exchange, I understood more than any confrontation could have revealed. Joan wasn't fighting for me. She was fighting for appearances. Robert wasn't my brother anymore, and Tracy knew everything but stayed silent because even the truth had lost its place in the wreckage of what once was. They thought I was still too weak to act, that I would sit quietly in my wheelchair, eating their lies one spoonful at a time. But I hadn't come back from the edge of death just to watch them pretend I never existed. I was Lucio Valentine. I remembered everything, and I was going to make sure they did too. The first time I heard them whispering outside my room, I wanted to believe I was imagining it. I had just finished another agonizing physical therapy session, my arms and legs burning with the effort of relearning how to move again. Joan had kissed my forehead and promised she'd be right back. But it wasn't her voice I heard first. It was Robert's. "How long do you think you can keep this up?" he hissed, voice low, but sharp. "As long as I have to," Joan answered, her words brittle. "He needs to believe I still care, at least until..." "Until what?" Robert snapped. "Until he's strong enough to find out the truth himself?" There was a long silence. I could picture them out there, Joan clutching her phone like a lifeline, Robert pacing like a caged animal. "He's not stupid," Robert said finally, softer now. "He'll figure it out." Joan's voice trembled when she spoke next. "I never thought he'd wake up." The ache in my chest returned, heavier than before. Every movement of my newly reawakened body was painful, but nothing hurt more than hearing Joan's words. I turned my face toward the window, watching the pale afternoon light blur against the glass. It wasn't that I didn't want to confront them. It was that part of me still wished it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that somehow, some way, this nightmare would unravel into something I could survive. But deep down, I knew. The betrayal wasn't new. It had simply been waiting for me to open my eyes. That evening, when Joan returned, her smile was stretched too thin. She wheeled me to the hospital garden like it was a special occasion, wrapping a blanket around my legs as if I were something fragile she could still pretend to love. "You're making so much progress, Lucio," she said, crouching beside me, her hand warm against mine. "Soon you'll be strong enough to leave here. We'll go home together." I said nothing. I stared at her, studying the flicker of nervousness she couldn't quite hide. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile faltering. "You're quiet today." I wanted to ask her what home she was talking about. The home we built together, or the one she had now filled with Robert's clothes, Robert's laughter, Robert's fingerprints on everything I had once called mine? Instead, I just nodded. I was too tired to fight lies with words. She tucked the blanket tighter around my legs and kissed my forehead again, a gesture that once might have made my heart race. Now, it only made my skin crawl. Later that night, I heard whispers again. Only this time, it was Tracy who stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed tightly across her chest, glaring at Joan. "How long do you think you can live like this?" Tracy asked, her voice sharp. "Playing nursemaid for a man you betrayed?" Joan flinched but kept her voice steady. "He needs me. I owe him that much." "Owe him?" Tracy laughed bitterly. "You don't repay love with pity, Joan. You repay it with loyalty, with truth, things you forgot a long time ago." "I loved him," Joan whispered, her voice cracking. "No," Tracy said coldly. "You loved the idea of him. But when it got hard, when he needed you most, you loved yourself more." I closed my eyes, letting their words wash over me. I should have felt anger. I should have burned with it. But all I felt was an aching emptiness, a hollowed-out space where something precious used to live. When I opened my eyes again, Tracy was gone. Joan sat alone in the chair beside my bed, her head bowed low, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve like a child caught stealing. She must have sensed me watching because she looked up, her eyes red. "Lucio," she said brokenly, "I made mistakes. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still want to try. Please, let me try." I stared at her for a long time, seeing not the girl I once loved, but the stranger she had become. "You already chose," I said quietly. Her face crumpled. She reached for me, but I turned my head away. In that moment, the rift between us became something physical, a canyon carved too deep to ever be bridged again. The next day, Robert came to see me. He didn't come with apologies or explanations. He came with a smug tilt of his head and a glint in his eyes that made my stomach turn. "Lucio," he said, clapping my shoulder like we were still boys playing soccer in the rain. "Good to see you up and moving. You're a fighter, man. Always. I didn't speak, I didn't move. I let him say his lines, watching him the way a wounded animal watches the hunter approach. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a murmur. "She was lonely, you know. 3 years is a long time to wait for a ghost." I met his gaze, steady and cold. "And yet you couldn't even wait a year," I said. His smile faltered. For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. Something ugly, something he didn't want me to see. He straightened, brushing invisible dust off his jacket. "You'll get over it," he said lightly. "We all have to move on sometime." He left then, whistling a tuneless song under his breath. I sat there long after he was gone, feeling the final threads of the life I had fought so hard for unravel completely. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was something else entirely. I was awake. The days blurred together, stitched with silent misery and broken memories. Each morning, Joan would walk into my hospital room, her smile a little more strained, her touch a little more hesitant. Each night she would leave, her shadow lingering at the door as if she wanted to say something she no longer had the right to voice. I spent those endless hours trapped inside my own mind, every breath a reminder of the life I had once built and the ashes it had now become. I replayed the scenes over and over. Robert's easy laughter in my living room, Joan's soft hand slipping into mine, Tracy's awkward glances whenever she visited. It all made sense now, every hesitation, every unfinished sentence from the past year. The betrayal had been rotting under the surface long before my body had given up. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the man I used to be in the mirror. Strong shoulders, bright eyes, a smile that reached the corners of my face. That man was gone now, hollowed out and emptied, leaving only a shell behind. I barely recognized myself. The hospital walls felt like a prison. The doctors spoke in hopeful tones about my recovery, as if healing muscles could stitch a broken heart back together. They didn't understand that my real wounds weren't the ones visible on scans. They didn't see how every word, every polite nod from Joan twisted a knife deeper inside my chest. I would close my eyes at night and pretend I was still the man she had once loved, the man Robert had once sworn loyalty to. But even my dreams had turned against me. I would see Joan's face, smiling, but not for me. I would hear Robert's voice, laughing, but never by my side. I would wake up gasping, clutching the thin hospital sheets, like they were the last threads holding my sanity. Together, some days Tracy would visit. She wouldn't say much. Just sit there, her hands curled tightly into fists in her lap, her face pale with unspoken anger. It was in those quiet visits that I realized she was the only one who still saw me. Not the broken patient, not the obstacle. One afternoon, after another grueling therapy session, Tracy stayed behind. She leaned against the window, watching the rain streak the glass, her voice low. "You don't have to forgive them, Lucio," she said. "You don't owe them anything." Her words cracked something inside me, something brittle and fragile. I hadn't even realized how tightly I had been clinging to the idea that somehow forgiveness was expected of me, that somehow Waking up meant pretending everything was fine. I didn't answer her. I just closed my eyes and let the silence swallow the room, because if I spoke, I might scream. There was a part of me that still whispered, maybe it wasn't all her fault. Maybe Robert lied to her. Maybe she believed I was never coming back. Maybe loneliness had hollowed her out until she reached for the only hand still reaching back. But there was another voice, louder now, that told the brutal truth. If she had truly loved me, no amount of loneliness could have excused what she had done. No betrayal could ever be painted over with pretty lies. The suspense of what came next gnawed at me. I couldn't stay here forever, pretending to heal while they planned their future. I couldn't be the weak, broken version of Lucio they pitied. I was standing at the edge of something, teetering between two choices. One would lead me back into the illusion, back into their web of half-truths and guilt. The other was a cliff into the unknown, into the terrifying, brutal freedom of living without them. Most nights, when the hospital quieted down and the moonlight cast long shadows across the floor, I would practice moving my legs under the covers inch by inch. No nurses, no audience, just me, forcing strength back into muscles that barely remembered how to obey. Every trembling movement wasn't just about walking again, it was about taking back something they had stolen from me. My life, my choices, my dignity. The suspense stretched tighter every day. Joan became more desperate in her visits, planning outings, dropping hints about getting me a place close to her and Robert. She spoke like a woman trying to soothe a wild animal, carefully baiting a trap. "You'll love it," she said one afternoon, kneeling beside my wheelchair with a photo in her hands. "It's near the ocean. Remember how you used to love the water?" I stared at her, numb. It wasn't the ocean I had loved. It was the way she laughed when the waves hit her knees, the way her hair tangled in the salt air, the way she had once turned to me like I was her whole world, all gone now. Robert didn't bother hiding his smugness anymore. Whenever he visited, he would slap me on the back like an old buddy, his smile too wide, his eyes too cold, as if daring me to confront him, as if he already knew I couldn't. I bided my time. I smiled when I needed to. I nodded when it was expected. I played the part of the broken man so well that even Joan seemed convinced. Inside, I was gathering every broken shard of myself, piecing together something sharper, stronger. They had buried me once. They thought I would stay buried. They were wrong. It was Tracy who shattered the illusion I had been carefully holding together, dropping a truth so sharp that it split the fragile calm I had wrapped around myself. She came one evening when the hospital halls were deserted, her jacket soaked from the rain outside, her face drawn tight with something heavy. She didn't sit this time. She stood at the foot of my bed, her knuckles white around the strap of her purse. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked up at her, tired and hollowed out, but something in her trembling. Hands caught my attention. "They're planning to move you," she said, "to a private facility, far outside the city, somewhere quiet, somewhere away." For a long moment, I didn't understand. I blinked at her, feeling as if the world had tilted slightly under me. "Joan says it's for your recovery," Tracy continued, each word cutting deeper. "But it's not. They want to control everything, where you live, who you see. They think if you're tucked away somewhere safe, you won't be a threat anymore." A threat. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. I, Lucio, the man who had once promised to build a life with Joan, was now nothing more than a liability they needed to quietly lock away. "They're setting it up like they're doing you a favor," Tracy said bitterly. "But once you're there, it'll be harder to leave. Harder to be seen, harder to be heard." I clenched my fists under the thin blanket, feeling the blood surge painfully through my weakened limbs. "And Robert?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Tracy looked away. "He's the one paying for it. Signed all the papers this morning." For a moment, the world blurred at the edges. It wasn't enough that they had stolen my life. Now, they wanted to erase me entirely. I leaned back against the pillow, forcing myself to breathe through the storm raging inside me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. Tracy's eyes shimmered with something like guilt. Or maybe it was pity. Or maybe it was something deeper, something she had been carrying for far too long. "Because you don't deserve this," she said. "Because once, when everyone else forgot you, I didn't." Her voice cracked and she bit her lip hard enough. "To draw blood." "They think you're still too weak to fight back," she whispered. "But I see you, Lucio. You're not weak. You're surviving." Her words wrapped around me like armor, hardening the parts of me that had begun to crumble. "They're moving you in 3 days," she said. "If you want to do something, it has to be now." And just like that, the path became clear. They hadn't just betrayed me. They hadn't just abandoned me. They were trying to bury me alive. When Tracy left, I stared up at the ceiling for a long time, my heart pounding in my ears. 3 days. 3 days to reclaim my life or lose it forever. Shifted under the covers, ignoring the pain lancing through my body. It didn't matter anymore. Pain was a familiar enemy. I could fight through it. In the silence, the plan began to form. Quiet, careful, ruthless. I would leave not as a broken man, not as the abandoned fiancé or the betrayed friend. I would leave as Lucio Valentine, the man they never truly destroyed. And when I walked out of this place, it would be on my own terms. It would be the beginning of the end for all of them. The day of my planned transfer arrived with eerie calmness. The hospital staff, handpicked by Robert, moved with rehearsed politeness, their voices low and careful, around me. I played my role perfectly. Quiet, docile, broken. Every smile I gave, every word I spoke was calculated to keep suspicion low. Tracy had done her part. She had slipped me what I needed: a key card, a phone with a single number programmed inside, and the address of the car that would be waiting 2 blocks away. The plan was simple, but dangerous. A single mistake could chain me to Robert and Jones. Mercy forever. I was wheeled down the hallway toward the waiting ambulance. Joan walked beside me, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder as if she owned me. Robert trailed behind, humming a song I used to love, twisting the memory into something foul. "You're going to love the new place," Joan said brightly, her voice full of false excitement. "It's peaceful. You'll have your own nurse, everything you need to get better." Better for what? To sit quietly while they lived out the life they had stolen from me? As the orderlies loaded me into the ambulance, Joan leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "I'm doing this for you, Lucio," she whispered. "You'll understand one day." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I let the words slide off me like oil on water, the doors shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. Inside the ambulance, I waited until we were 5 minutes away from the hospital. Then, I acted. I faked a seizure. The paramedic panicked, pulling over immediately. While he rushed to check my vitals, I unbuckled the straps with trembling hands and swung a heavy fist at his temple. He slumped over with a groan. My body screamed in protest, but adrenaline burned through the pain. I pushed the door open and stumbled into the street, the cold air like knives against my skin. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I ran. Every step was agony, but I forced my legs to move. The car Tracy had arranged was right where she said it would be. I yanked the door open and collapsed inside. The driver, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes, nodded once and pulled away from the curb without a word. "You're safe now," he said. "For now." I sat there panting, my hands shaking. For the first time in 3 years, I was truly free. But freedom wasn't enough. I needed the truth. I needed closure, and I needed them to see what they had done to me. 3 days later, I walked into my house. Our house. Joan and Robert had thrown a party to celebrate my successful transfer and their upcoming wedding. Yes, wedding Tracy had uncovered. The announcement hidden in a private social media account, an engagement party disguised as a charity event. Their smugness knew no bounds. The guests were laughing and drinking when I arrived, wearing a plain black jacket and a face that no longer belonged to the Lucio they remembered. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. No one recognized me at first. After all, I was supposed to be locked away in some countryside facility, drooling into my soup. It wasn't until I stood at the foot of the grand staircase that Joan saw me. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The room fell silent. "Lucio?" She choked, her voice trembling. Robert turned slowly, the color draining from his face. I took another step forward, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every lie, pressing into the soles of my feet. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, my voice calm and sharp. Joan stumbled forward, her hands outstretched as if she could explain it all away with a single touch. I thought you were supposed to be out of the way?" I finished for her. The guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the crackling tension in the air. Robert recovered first. He plastered a wide smile across his face and stepped between us. "Lucio, buddy, this is a misunderstanding," he said, oozing false charm. "We were just trying to do what's best for you. You needed care. Special care." I stared at him, unblinking. "Special care," I repeated. "Like stealing my house? My life? My wife?" The room gasped. Robert's smile faltered. Joan looked like she might collapse. "I loved you," Joan said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I waited for you, but you were gone for so long. I didn't know if you were ever coming back." "And that's why you married my best friend?" I asked, my voice rising. "That's why you tried to bury me alive?" She fell to her knees, sobbing. The pitying looks from the guests didn't touch me. I wasn't here for their sympathy. I wasn't here for their judgment. I was here for truth. "You could have left," I said coldly. "You could have divorced me. You could have lived your new life honestly, but you chose to chain me to a hospital. Bed and pretend you still cared while you planned a wedding with the man I trusted most." Robert's mask of charm cracked. "You don't understand," he snapped. "You don't know what it was like, watching you lie there, useless, dead inside. Joan needed someone. I gave her what you couldn't." "You gave her betrayal," I said. "You gave her cowardice." I pulled out the documents Tracy had uncovered. Proof of the forged medical records, the financial transfers, the signatures faked while I was unconscious. I threw them at Robert's feet. "You didn't just steal my wife," I said. "You stole my life." Robert paled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Joan crawled forward on her knees, clutching my leg. "Lucio, please," she sobbed. "We can fix this. We can—" "There's nothing left to fix," I said, my voice cold as steel. I looked around the room, locking eyes with every guest, every former friend who had come to celebrate my erasure. "Consider this party over," I said. I turned and walked out the door, leaving Joan wailing behind me, leaving Robert standing frozen, leaving everything that had once been my life burning in the ashes of their betrayal. Outside, the night air was crisp and clear. Tracy was waiting by the car, her face tight with concern. "You did it," she said softly. I nodded, but inside something still ached. It wasn't love. It wasn't anger. It was the ghost of the man I had once been. The man who had believed in loyalty, in promises, in forever. That man was dead now. And in his place stood someone new, someone who would never again be so easily broken. I didn't look back as I left the house that night. I didn't need to. I could feel it collapsing behind me like a rotting castle, the walls crumbling under the weight of all the lies. The old Lucio might have hesitated, might have felt guilt or sorrow, but that version of me had died the moment Joan and Robert decided. I was easier to erase than to love. The air outside was sharp and cold, stinging my face, but it smelled like freedom, like rebirth. Tracy opened the passenger door and I slid inside without a word. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The city lights stretched out before us, blurred by the tears I refused to shed. You did the right thing, Tracy said finally, her voice low. Did I? I asked, my voice hoarse. She turned her head toward me, her eyes shining. You're alive, that's enough. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that surviving was enough. But deep inside, a darker part of me knew that it wasn't. Not yet. Robert and Joan had destroyed a part of me that could never be rebuilt. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had buried me alive, left me to rot in a coffin of loneliness and despair. They needed to feel what I had felt. They needed to lose everything the way I had. The car drove through the sleeping city, and I stared, out the window, letting the plan form itself in the silence. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight in the open. I would dismantle them piece by piece, the same way they had dismantled me. It took weeks, but I was patient. The first blow came quietly. Robert's business deals, propped up by shady backdoor favors and Joan's dwindling family name, began to fall apart. Contracts vanished, investors pulled out, lawsuits crept in like snakes in the grass. It was Tracy who handled it all, her contacts slipping information exactly where it needed to be, her hands clean. One afternoon, sitting in a small cafe with the sun warming my back, I read the news on my phone. Robert's company was under investigation for fraud. His accounts were frozen. Joan's face appeared alongside his in every headline, her perfect reputation shredded overnight. And it was just the beginning. Next came the house. The one they had stolen from me, the one they had tried to turn into their own paradise. Turns out Robert had leveraged it for one of his failing deals. With the accounts frozen, the mortgage payments were missed. Foreclosure came fast and merciless. Watched from a distance as they stood on the curb, Joan screaming at the movers, Robert red-faced and broken, clutching a few pathetic boxes of their remaining possessions. No friends came to help. No family. Their world had collapsed, just like they had planned mine to. It still wasn't enough. I had one final move left. I bought the house back through a third party, paying in cash. I walked through the empty halls one rainy afternoon, the EAO walls echoing with memories that no longer had the power to hurt me. In the master bedroom, the same place where Joan and Robert had toasted to their future, I left a single envelope on the floor. Inside was a copy of their wedding announcement, the one they had never gotten to send out, along with a note written in my own hand. Congratulations on your new life. Too bad it never really belonged to you. I didn't wait for them to find it. I didn't need to see their faces. Revenge wasn't about watching them fall. It was about knowing they had lost the very thing they had taken for granted, the belief that I would stay buried forever. It was Tracy who stayed by my side through it all, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with steady presence. A cup of coffee when I couldn't sleep, a shoulder when I needed to be silent, a fierce loyalty that asked for nothing in return. One evening, as we sat watching the sunset bleed across the sky, Tracy turned to me. You know, she said softly, you're allowed to be happy again. I smiled, a real one this time. Maybe one day, I said. But not today. She didn't argue. She just nodded, as if she understood that healing wasn't something you could rush. It was something you had to choose. And I was finally learning how to choose myself. Months passed. Seasons changed. The last I heard, Joan had left the city, running from the wreckage of her name. Robert had taken a job states away, a low-level position far beneath the empire he had once dreamed of building. They would spend the rest of their lives haunted by what they lost, and I would spend the rest of mine remembering that survival is the purest form of revenge. One morning, Tracy found me sitting on the back porch sketching the sunrise. She handed me a cup of coffee, her fingers brushing mine. Thinking about the past? She asked. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. Thinking about the future. For the first time in a long time, the thought didn't feel heavy. It felt wide open, limitless. Lucio Valentine was not a man trapped by his past. He was a man reborn from it. I watched the sun climb higher into the sky, feeling its warmth seep into my bones, and for the first time in years I smiled without pain. I was free, and this time, no one would ever take that from me again.